Hey, can you hear me well? OK, thanks. So let's start with a quick honesty check to kick the things off. So please raise your hand if you have talked to your real user this week. Yeah, this week. And I don't mean, to be clear, don't mean reading Slack threads about the research. I don't mean going into the analytics, just talking to them. And be honest. OK, and what about last quarter? OK, I see many hands right now, and that's kind of what I expected, because most of the teams, they say that they do research and discovery, but the reality, I think, is a bit different. Because from my experience, in reality, it's doing research and discovery in general is like eating healthy, going to the gym, or meditating. Everybody says that they do it. Everybody says and agrees that it's important, but I don't think that it is for real, because in reality, it's more like this guilty pleasure pizza you have for the second time this week, or the stack of books that you definitely plan to get to, or the gym membership that you forgot to cancel like 3 years ago. And in most of the companies, research and discovery in general, they are either rare or reactive or missing altogether. And in fast-moving environments, like, for example, startup or scale-ups, it can even feel impossible, because your roadmap probably has changed like for the third time this month, and the PM that you work with, he wants the answer now, not a week from today. And most probably you have a dozen of super important meetings to attend just this afternoon. And yet, I think that this is the time when research and discovery are crucial the most. So if you are sitting and thinking right now, are we the only team kind of not doing it? So the good news is that you're absolutely not. Tomek Tomaszewski from Product Craft Pro, he ran a very interesting survey with Polish product people, and the answers to the survey, let's say that they were honest, because 42% of the respondents said that they rarely do any discovery. 24% of them said that they do it once per quarter, which, let's be real, means basically the same. And 69% of them agreed that they prioritize their backlogs mostly on the stakeholder pressure, and only 42% admitted that the company that they work for values discovery at all. So yes, it's normal that you may sometimes feel that you are flying blind, but it's definitely not healthy. And we knew that we couldn't keep building like this as well. Because 2 years ago, this was us. We were moving fast, processing tens of millions of dollars in crypto transactions every month, expanding to the new markets under new regulators, and having new product ideas popping up like mushroom after the rain. And we had all the great data. We had the dashboard, we had the funnels, the analytics, etc. And yet we couldn't answer the most basic questions, like, for example, who are our customers and why they are even interested in crypto in the first place. So we are making more decisions, but with less clarity, and we were building fast, but we were building blind to what was happening on the other side of the screen. And it was like in this classic startup paradox. So the more successful you become, the less you understand your customers, unless you do something about this. But before we go further, you may have a fair question to ask. So who the heck are we to even talk about this? And my name is Kmita, and I've been a designer for over 17 years now. And for the majority of that time, I played the role of head of design. And here is Mazur, together with me, my friend, colleague, great designer and researcher. And together, we went through this journey, from sticky notes to organized spreadsheets, and from gut feeling to structured research. And what we'll present to you today is the result of that evolution. But to give you some context first, we work together at Ramp Network, a fast-scaling Web3 startup with Polish roots, where our core product was something we called Crypto Checkout SDK. So it worked basically in a way that partner applications, like, for example, crypto wallets, they plugged in this SDK into their product so that they can allow their users to buy or sell crypto directly inside their products with best possible experience and without losing any contact with those users. And the scale The scale was already amazing when I joined Ramp 4 years ago because we were processing hundreds of millions of dollars in yearly transaction volumes. We had 8+ million of users. We were regulated in 4 global regions. You know, fast-paced, VC-backed, and definitely high-pressure environment. And in the early days, the product direction in Ramp came from the sharp intuition because Ramp's founders, they felt the pain of getting into crypto on their own because they did it again and again. And they made many, many bold calls, and they were very, very often right. But do you have maybe any ideas what major issue we faced a few years later after such iterations? The problem was that this intuition, it got us far, but as the company grew, it just couldn't keep up because there were months when Ramp was hiring and onboarding 10, 20, or maybe even 30 new employees every month. So you can imagine how much and how many organizational challenges it creates, but the one that was closest to my heart was how we make sure that all those new employees, that they understand our customers good enough to make good product decisions. And all of this with the ongoing problems or challenges of working within the startup environment. Also, every month, new questions popped up, and those were the questions that data alone couldn't answer. Like, for example, why were the users dropping off on specific stages of the journey that we offered to them? Was it the price, the confusion, or maybe the lack of trust, or maybe a bug that we didn't know that existed yet? And in the same time, we all in the company, we had many ideas how to make Ramp even better. Many bold and exciting ideas, but we didn't have a way how to validate them or to compare one to another. Actually, there were many occasions when I think that we had too many bets, but too little clarity. So I got the green light to do something about it, and in under a year, we managed to build a continuous research practice that delivered real continuous insights directly into the hands of the product teams and company leadership. And I don't mean reports that stay unread in the email accounts for weeks. I mean tangible insights that shape the product roadmaps and influence the company strategy. They also allowed all the company members to empathize with the real users and not some sort of imagination that we had about them, but the real people on the other side of the screen. And this talk will be our playbook. We'll share with you what we did, what worked, so you can copy it to your company, and what didn't, so you can avoid those. The kind of thing I wish I would have seen and read before I started. And now, before I tell you what we exactly did, I need to make a tiny confession, which is kind of important for the story, because I tried to get the research budget, and I tried to do it like several times, but every time I failed miserably. So I knew that if I want to make this happen right now, I need to do something differently, and I have to prove the value of research first. So this brings me to our first low-cost experiments. Because the first aha moment for us comes from something super simple yet super effective, and this is also the part where the startup energy really kicks in, so bear with me for a moment. And the problem that we faced at the very beginning was that how we could recruit the participants for our studies. And the crypto-native users that we aimed to talk to in the first place, they were crazy about the privacy, and they didn't want to talk to us. Like 99.9% of them didn't even respond to our messages, not mentioning scheduling a call. Also, we had a newly created legal team which didn't know what paperwork we should sign with them, and the finance team wasn't sure which legal entity should pay them for the interviews. So, like you see, we had many organizational challenges before we even started talking to anybody. But turns out that, like I said, every month we were onboarding at least a dozen, or maybe a few dozens of new employees, and they were very close, at least some of them were very close to our customer personas. But here's the kicker. Imagine how much surprised I was when I discovered that some of those new employees, after even 6 months, that they hadn't used the product like at all. And I remember one particular case, a manager in the engineering who, after several months of work, came to one of my designers asking for a quick intro to understand how all the products that we offer work and connect together. And honestly, I didn't know if I should laugh or cry at this stage. So together with the people team, I added a step to the company onboarding process, a mandatory user testing session with me or one of my designers. So we would sit down with all those new hires, ask about their crypto experience, their goals, their expectations, etc., and then just watch them doing the first transaction on Ramp and just listened, took notes. It was a classic user testing session, but it was fast, free, and shockingly insightful. And here's what we saw again and again, because first of all, the crypto beginners, even the ones who made their first transactions somewhere else, they had huge problems and they were stuck on the step when we asked them about their crypto wallet address. They weren't sure which wallet works with which crypto network. They didn't understand the differences between the wallet brands. And even if they managed to install a wallet during the test with us, sometimes even finding the address within the new app was a huge blocker for them. And we didn't have any idea how many of those people were in our customer base. We also had no idea how often the third-party tools that we relied on were misfiring in the wild. So we started spotting those during the same user interviews. And imagine one user going through a traditional standard flow, and suddenly the camera, which was crucial to finish the document verification process, just wouldn't fire up. And it wasn't an edge case. It just never showed up in our internal QA. And the reason for that is that those third-party tools, they just weren't hooked up into our QA environments. And even if they they didn't allow for the proper testing. So we assumed that they were working fine because they worked fine on our phones until they just didn't. So now we were not only dealing with confused users, but also with flaky integrations that failed only in the wild. And those two reasons, they together were bleeding the conversion. Friction plus failure, and we hadn't seen neither of them in the data dashboards. The second aha moment comes from something yet simple but effective as well. We used Hotjar, the session recordings tool. And interestingly, at first, the crypto native engineers in our company, they had many concerns about it. They had the privacy issues, the performance issues, like basically, why are you watching my users? But once we rolled it out, nobody asked again, because watching those recordings was like opening the Pandora's box. For example, we saw real users hitting invisible walls, like reaching to the final pay button and finding it grayed out and inactive. And it was a bug created by one of the compliance systems that hadn't yet returned its approval for this particular transaction. For one user in one partner with one token, just the timing mismatch killed the transaction success. But on the analytics side, everything seemed OK, because the approval finally came, just too late to refresh the UI. And yeah, you may say that this was a total edge case, and that's true. But if you're doing thousands of such transactions every day, such edge cases, they mean money left on the table. So those drop-offs, they looked like noise in the quant data, but the session recordings, they told us the full story, and solving those type of issues allowed us to achieve one of the best months when it comes to the conversion improvement at Ramp. And now is where it all comes together, because right around that time, the company hired a new chief product officer, and thankfully, he already knew the value of research. So those two scrappy experiments were my ammunition to ask for the budget, and the budget led me to hire my first researcher. And spoiler alert, it was Michał. So Michał, take it from me.
All right, can you hear me well? Yeah, okay. Right, so when I joined, or when I was joining Ramp, I was, of course, working full-time at my previous job. I was preparing for my own wedding abroad, packing up, and spent weekends just working on my portfolio so I could join the company. So I was a bit tired. But I always think about recruitment processes that they give you like a sneak peek into what the organization is really going to be like. And when I interviewed at Ramp, nobody asked me like, oh, which tools are you using for this or that? Instead, they asked me about process building, about educating stakeholders, about the strategic value of research. So I knew that I wasn't just plugging into an existing playground. I'd have to build the playground itself. But how the company operated had a lot of nuance in it. And I personally had very limited experience with crypto. So I did what apparently almost every crypto bro on Reddit tells you to do. I did my own research. I started with that. And the difference between the work of a designer and working as a researcher is that as a designer, you create things that people touch, interact with, and as a researcher, that's rarely the case. So when I understood that my actual users were my colleagues, I wanted to get the broadest possible business context right after joining the company. So I set up interviews, stakeholder interviews with customer support, of the designers, of the PMs in the company, with engineering, so that I could understand how the company operated, what was done to date, and especially what we knew about our users. What was also important to me was to understand who was hopeful about the newly formed research role to be added to the organization, and who was skeptical, who might be worried that I might slow down their work or slow down their delivery processes. So when thinking about this and how to start with research, I wasn't thinking about what questions to ask users in the interviews. I started thinking about how can I design a research practice that is sustainable in this particular company with this exact culture and this exact pace of work. In the interviews with my stakeholders, two big themes came up. The first one was the much more long-term, deeper understanding of the motivations and the needs of our potential or existing users. The second one about de-risking projects and product features in the short term, basically making sure that we don't waste time and resources on something that would be irrelevant to the problems we wanted to solve. So one about more long-term value, about slowing down, and the other one about quick validation and speed in research. And this was a fast-paced place, so I knew that I needed to have some sort of a buy-in quite fast. And when I think about research and how we are often taught about research is kind of as in a courtroom, like you prove or disprove an existing hypothesis. Just like a simple mental model you get from like school, university, or just the scientific method in general. And I'm not a particular fan of this approach. I like open, explorative research. But here, even though there were really foundational questions to be answered, I wanted to kick off things fast. And within 3 weeks since joining, roughly, I already had some findings in some of the one-off research projects that I did that directly shaped the product roadmap, or at least informed it. And the PMs, started to lean in, started to ask me for validation of some of their ideas, so that I saw that there is some sort of traction within the company. But while delivering these quick one-off validations, I also started laying down foundations for something much more long-term. So I set up conversations with actual users, existing users or potential users, this continuous stream of interviews that we would do like every month or every week, making sure that we gather as much data as possible and in as much depth as possible as well. Without a particular script, just a couple of bullet points that could kick things off quite quickly. And I also wanted our teams to see the research firsthand, so I invited some of my colleagues to join in. And one of my colleagues joined the session like this, and it wasn't the greatest interview. And he asked me, "Hey, Michał, was there any value in what we just saw, or did we just waste 45 minutes of my time?" It wasn't the nicest question to hear as a researcher, but definitely a fair one. I responded to him that you don't always get like a neat, quotable insight from every interview that you do, but the effects are more long-term and they accrue over time. Perhaps he expected like a breakthrough, something he could put in a Jira ticket immediately, but it didn't happen. Sometimes it does happen. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Fargo, but it's a movie about a police investigation. The main character is a police inspector who, at some point in the movie, meets with her old friend, Mike Yanagita. They meet in a bar. What's particularly odd is that this scene doesn't offer any new leads in the investigation. It's not related to the movie plot at all. It doesn't advance the plot at all. But this meeting shifts how the main character sees people. It gives her a new, broader perspective, and that reframes her worldview so that she can think differently about the case completely. And I wanted to create those Mike Yanagita moments for my teammates. And we had such a moment when in one of the surveys, it turned out that so many of our users were doing their first ever crypto transaction through our platform. And believe me, there are so many easier and quicker ways to start investing in crypto than using self-custodial wallets. So my colleagues had assumed for years that only crypto-native experienced users were interacting with our platform, but the reality was otherwise. And to create these moments, I wanted to immerse the teams in as much data as possible. So we, together in a smaller working group, we dove deep into the insights, into quotes that I got from the interviews, and interview transcripts, and we actually debated some of the interpretations of these quotes to make sure that this is not just Michał's view of the world, but it's a shared perspective that we would have. So we had these sessions, and that immersion through a couple of sessions started to create empathy in some of my teammates and in the organization as a whole. And with that empathy, it started building a mechanism that the business decisions stopped being purely about abstract KPIs, but started to become about serving real people. Let me just grab a sip of water. Sorry. So we were kind of ready to start serving real people. And these real people, both complete newbies in crypto and experienced users, felt immense stress in the whole crypto world and the apps they used, but it didn't discourage them from using new crypto platforms at all. And when you go through so much data, you can see patterns emerge. So it's not just like one Mike Yanagita quote, but it's actually multiple simple, short quotes that form patterns. And when you have these patterns, when you see them, you're not guessing anymore. The product decisions that you make are actually rooted in reality. And it was super useful both to the product team and to marketing so that we could create better copy over time. And what's best is when these stories and these patterns actually line up with hard numbers. At some point, I noticed that in many of our interviews, people started mentioning that they do like a very tiny crypto transaction the first time they use a new platform, just because they've been scammed or they heard of some platforms that were not legit, so they do this tiny transaction to see if it works. And when we looked at our quantitative data, it was actually the case. We noticed that the first transaction was actually very, very small, and when you looked at the average value of transaction per user further on, the values are much higher. So we knew that we needed to optimize that first transaction because once we had that first transaction experience done well, we could actually start making profit on the users. As you can imagine, we did not make much profit on the first tiny transactions. And that triangulation of like interviews, surveys that we did, plus the quantitative data was the real unlock. It didn't help us just explain reality, it helped us to validate new product bets and new product ideas as well. And one such idea was to offer transactional insurance to our users. So basically, users, securing themselves against some like negative experiences or scams. Potentially was a huge differentiator for us as a company. Not many companies offered it, and I was tasked to kind of find some data with a variety of methods to validate whether this is a good idea or not, or how could we do it well, potentially. And the beauty of having this continuous stream of interviews that I mentioned is that we gather data weekly. So when we started thinking about a new product bet like insurance, we already had a lot of data to feed into that decision. So we already had something that could feed and help us understand the problem better, along with targeted research for this particular bet. But it didn't stop there. In the next interviews, we actually folded in, so this stream is always going. Yeah? In the next round of interviews, we could fold in some business-oriented questions, so the script that we talked to users with evolved over time. So the continuous research practice not only fed into decisions, but also evolved to give like sharper business insights going forward. And you can call this Mazur effect. No, please don't call it that. Please don't call it that. But what was quite interesting to see is that when we had this stream of interviews, they were all kind of open, explorative. And as Judd Anton, one of the user research experts, underlines, is that when you do too much of this open-ended, high-level research, it kind of drifts over time. It doesn't give you sharp insights. Sometimes it's fun, it's fascinating. I love speaking to people from around the world, like every week at my work. It's super engaging. But at some point, if it doesn't actually inform business decisions, it's not necessarily worth the investment. And to make sure that it sticks in an organization is not just producing documents, but building a culture around it. You may have heard the alleged Peter Drucker quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sorry. And I could design the neatest strategy documents in the world, but if nobody cared in the organization, they would just die a slow death in Notion or Confluence. So at some point, when we started gathering data from so many different places, started synthesizing them with the teams, they started to inform many other product decisions and company meetings. And in many places, when I also researched the topic of creating business research practices at companies, sometimes it was recommended to have like a central repository of data, and that could be used by organizational leaders and to make decisions. But we knew that wasn't enough. So in our case, the research hub, the central piece, was not just a repository, but was a couple of activities that we did, a couple of new rituals. If you've seen one of the talks earlier today, it was underlined how important rituals are and to weave them into existing meetings and structures. We made sure to do the same. We set up a dedicated Slack channel for user research where we posted bite-sized summaries of interviews. I edited them, made sure that I experimented with the form, and some of my colleagues could see users firsthand, see those recordings and those insights themselves. Secondly, as I mentioned, I invited others to participate in research, which was quite engaging to them as well. If they did not want to do any of the previous things, they could always go to the static insights repository that I created with summaries of all the research projects that we've done. We created personas as useful heuristics in the organization that did not have such artifacts before. And these personas were created based on thousands of data points, both qualitative and quantitative. Wasn't just like this sticky note, wishful persona that magically fits all of your product features, but it was actually grounded in real data. We made sure that we coached and educated. We set up internal training sessions for some of the team members to make sure that they understand how to work with research, how to work with research insights going forward. And finally, we made sure that insights and user stories are heard throughout the company in different meetings, both all company meetings and smaller groups, or particularly the product team. So we made sure that the research is seeded everywhere. And the result, well, research was not at that point this mysterious thing over there done by a separate department. It started to become a habit, like a piece of, like a small part of the organizational culture of the company. And with that, Piotr and I can now step back, look at the past few months, and summarize like what worked, what didn't, and what could be the playbook that we could recommend for others in a similar position. So what changed about the company since we spent a few of these months developing the research practice? First, we could finally answer the burning why behind some of the trends that we've seen. instead of seeing just drop-offs in the funnel, we had some answers. So, for instance, we observed users dropping off at the point of selecting the crypto network they would like to buy the particular asset on. And you may not know this, but you can buy, for example, USDC, one of the most popular stablecoins in the world, on 20 different networks, often incompatible, just with using Ramp network. No, doesn't matter if if you use other apps as well, that will be even more. Now, imagine the confusion if you're a new user. Secondly, we saw that research shortened and simplified our decision-making process, even on the low level. So with the design team, we managed to kind of limit the influence of our own ego and personal preferences when making these decisions. It really influenced how we worked. And to give you an example, also, Kuba Djedzic, who actually was at WaysConf a few years ago, did an impressive UX writing project where he created this set of UX writing principles that finalized in creating a custom GPT that we used to create better, coherent copy across the product. And the GPT also took into account the needs and the pain points of our users that we knew that existed. By validating some of these ideas earlier, just like I gave you an example with the transactional insurance, the company saved money, saved effort in not investing in the parts that would not give enough value to the users. Research started to become also an important input into OKR meetings, into roadmap planning meetings. Many of the executive level meetings that we now have actually start with a brief session about what we learned about users in the past few weeks or months. We noticed that the customer's voice was spread across the company, that was mentioned in hallway conversations, somewhere organic on Slack, so teams other than product or design were using this data and reference the personas, for example, when speaking about the product going forward, which was very, very uplifting. And also what's important, research sparked a lot of innovation in the company. So instead of just matching the competition, copying competition, we're actually able to innovate, and that was truly liberating to be able to do that. So now over to Piotrek.
So what exactly worked for us well so that you could copy it to your company? First of all, the starting with low-cost but high-impact research projects like the scrappy interviews that we did with the new hires or the Hotjar recordings. Those proved the value of research without needing a budget, and they created the early wins that later allowed me to ask for the budget that unlocked the future investments. Later, setting up the continuous research loops that Michał told you about was a great way to go, because this created a steady inflow of insights that fit into the company's decision-making rhythm instead of traditional sometimes lengthy research projects. Also, in the beginning, Discount.com was a key enabler for us. For those of you who don't know the tool, it is a tool that allows you to recruit the testers quickly, and it gave us a quick turnaround in research project, which kind of impressed the stakeholders, especially in the beginning. And even though Ramp is not using it anymore, it was a huge accelerator for us in the beginning. Also, for a long time, we ran on something that I could call half a researcher setup. So the part-time of Michał's dedicated to research, and it allowed us to have enough time to maintain all the resources, but without reducing the budget for the researcher position when something goes not so great. Also, what worked very, very well was that designers, they were the first evangelists of the research insights and the research in general. They spread the value and the insights into their teams, from PMs through engineers, and from that it grown kind of organically. And last, the clip reels and other ways of engagement. So short thematic videos that we shared on Slack made the insights emotionally engaging and hard to ignore, especially for those people in the company who don't work within the product or research every day. And we experimented a lot with the form, and I would recommend you to do the same to make them more engaging. But of course, not everything worked perfectly. We also learned a lot from what didn't work. And First of all, we saw occasional decision paralysis. And by that, I mean that some of the teams tried to back up every tiny decision with research, which slowed us down and burned the resources without a big reason for that. We also ran into something that I would call occasional mismatch of expectations. So some of the company execs, they kind of expected that research will tell them or give them a clear yes, do this answer. But in reality, research more often will tell you what not to do, and that's exactly as valuable. Also, processing the data was a heavy manual work, and while tools like Dovetail or other AI-powered tools, they definitely help, but they still require a careful oversight to avoid the hallucinations. And with only half of the researchers' time, we were at the bare minimum to keep the things moving. Also, unfortunately, it took months for us to get other people actively participating in research. And early on, it was mostly Michał, which created obviously some bottlenecks, but the little pressure from the mentioned CPO helped to break that pattern. And unfortunately, even now, research is not yet a reflex for every product team while they are making key product decisions. We've made a huge progress, but there is still some cultural gap to close. And lastly, building complex databases and research repositories and tools like Notion or other, it may not have the greatest return on the investment if the content inside is not like extremely useful to the stakeholders from the very beginning. So my advice would be, especially when you start, not to over-invest in structures, but rather focus on the stories that you can tell and you can share publicly. And coming to the end, when you're building a research from scratch, there is no such thing as a magic playbook. But here is the one I wish I would have seen on the day one. First of all, start small and be useful. You don't need to wait for the permission. Pick one low-cost pilot project that can solve a business issue right now, and the goal right now is to prove the value of research fast. Second, find your allies early, and especially in the bigger organizations, you will need a senior exec champion who will help you to push the research outside of the design, somebody with influence enough in the organization to make it stick across the company. Because without such alliance, you will have a huge chance of hitting the wall with your head hard, like I did on at least few occasions. Next, make sure that you are getting quality inputs, and that means the triangulation that Michał told you about. So mixing qualitative interviews with quantitative data, market trends, and competitor moves. Remember that you don't need to research everything on your own. You can use all the high-quality sources available to you, but in the same time, remember that if somebody will catch you on low-quality inputs, it will diminish the whole trust to the whole research that you did. Fourth, make the work visible and do it fast. So build this clean, usable repository for your colleagues to use. Tie every finding to a business outcome and share it so often that ignoring it becomes harder than acting on them. Fifth, teach others how to fish. Coach other team members how to do light research so it becomes part of the culture and not a bottleneck. And finally, assign the ownership because yeah, can you see? No. What's happened? Okay, yes, it's there. Assign the ownership because somebody needs to protect the health of the system, and especially if it's just part of their time, to prevent the quality from slipping and the insights from turning into messy, forgotten reports. Because research won't do it itself. It's like a muscle that you need to practice, and somebody has to be responsible for the alignment, coaching, and maintaining the quality. So my final words for you are that building research practice from scratch, for me, it wasn't about the perfect processes or fancy decks. It was about starting small, proving the value of research fast, and making the voice of the customers impossible to ignore. And at Ramp, we didn't wait for the perfect time or the perfect budget, but over time, we managed to create this reputable company-wide habit that influenced the company strategy, what we built, and probably even more importantly, what we didn't build. So if you would take one thing from this talk, let it be this. You don't need to wait for the permission to start. You need a question that is worth answering from the business perspective. You need a way to get this answer and persistence to make sure that this answer is heard. Because for me, research is not a good practice. It's a way that allows us to build products that truly serve our customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We still have 4 minutes for the Q&A, so let's roll. Are there any questions from the... Yeah, okay.
So I'm burning to ask this question because I first really like your presentation, the energy, everything. But I think you didn't talk about one thing, is how Miral is a great researcher. And I'm just wondering, how do you find the kind of researchers like Miral? Because all the technique, everything you said makes sense to me, but over and over, and I have 25 years of experience in this area. I have created research team, fired research team. It takes a certain type of people to do what you did or not give up on do that. So I'm just checking, what are also your recommendations to get the right researchers to do that?
Okay, so in this case, it was very easy because I know Michał like for 10 years or something, and it's not the first company that we work together, so I knew what he's capable of, and I told him clearly what I expect and what we want to build, so I knew that there is a fit. So sorry that I don't have a better answer for you right now, but it was just a matter of knowing each other and knowing what we are capable of.
Thank you. Do we have any other hand raised?
I think everybody started. Oh no, there's a question.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about, like bootstrapping the research culture in the company, right? But it's been like a while ago, I guess. So my question would be, what do you do to keep that going, right? Because at some point it becomes like a day-to-day thing, and then it becomes an obstacle with in delivering things fast. And how do you keep going the excitement about the research, and how you keep providing like a feedback of like it makes sense to do research?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I might take that one. So I think what's crucial here as well is that the company is undergoing a transformation. We are launching quite a few new features, potentially shifting entirely like how we work and how we operate in the market. Plus, research has turned out to be really instrumental in the sense that we started to look at different markets worldwide. So research turned out to be super useful to have the preliminary validation of some of these markets. And I think a part of this playbook and a part of what we could recommend is just to keep it as visible as possible.